Ladies and gentlemen, it's difficult to always remind yourself, especially in South Africa, that sometimes the rhetoric of our politicians is just retarded. They just say things that are just really stupid. And actually, it takes the international community to review or look at the statements said by our politicians before we sit back and go, yeah, it was rather stupid. But before we get on to the main news stories of today, can I yet again remind you, if you haven't already, please subscribe to the channel. And if you would like to support the work that I do here, you're welcome to buy me a coffee. In most nights, I work really late. A coffee would really help. So for those of you who didn't notice, Julius Malema on Human Rights Day, Human Rights Day, sang, "Kill the Boer," and talked about how evil the white people were. Now for us in South Africa, that was just Monday. For the international community who looks at a very angry man marching on a stage singing, "Kill the Boer, shoot, shoot, shoot," and then mimicking the actions of a machine gun, the international community, who are not retarded, looks at that and goes, oh, really? Well, these are angry people. These are like the African version of Nazis. But for us in South Africa, we're assured that is not the case, and that instead what you're actually seeing is a form of political protest which nobody takes seriously, we are told. Now, you see, this all became interesting because Elon Musk, who's obviously a native-born South African, but obviously he's been living out the country since he was like 16? Something like that. Anyway, he saw the video, which he usually does. He gets tagged in these quite a lot. And he retweeted it, and he said, yo, check these people out. They're horrendous. Because for those of you who don't know, Elon Musk is directly attacking Julius Malema online, specifically because of the Kill the Boer chant. In typical fashion, Donald Trump saw the tweet and retweeted the tweet. So it now appears that Donald Trump has seen Julius Malema's Kill the Boer chant. Kill the Boer, kill the farmer. That's what he says. Trump retweets it and said, we're taking note of these irresponsible calls for violence against Afrikaners/whites. So in response to this, Kali Kriel, the CEO of AfriForum, noticed Donald Trump retweeting the tweet. And basically said that he welcomes the intervention of Donald Trump and he thanks him for taking note. Now, in typical fashion, that's going to mean that Kali Kriel is, I don't know, guilty of treason or something? Because other people can see what they can see and hear what they can hear. And all he's doing is noticing that they saw it. So why did all this become important? Well, that's because Marco Rubio also went on to say that South African farmers, our white farmers, must be offered admission because they're facing violence. And he says that the Americans have a responsibility to protect the white South Africans who are being faced with violence, and that they should allow them entry into the United States, because they cannot allow the anti-white violent rhetoric to be used against the white Afrikaners of South Africa. He further went on to say that the United States is proud to offer those individuals who qualify for admission access to their great nation, and that they were doing this in order to stave off the horrible threat of violence. Now, you see, there's interesting things in there. The first is, for those of you who think you're just going to be able to go, I'm white, can I come in? They're going to go, yeah. He does say those who qualify. And I still maintain, although many of my other content creator colleagues don't believe the same, I still maintain there is going to be some kind of floodgate stopper. You can't just open up the floodgates and say, 7 million whites, or you come. It's just not going to happen. He does also then say the continued threat of violence. Now that in itself became interesting because it means that he almost understands that there isn't a degree of actual violence right now. So for all our media colleagues who are sitting there fact-checking all of this stuff and saying nothing's going on, yeah, but you see there is a threat of violence. And that's what the United States government is noting. Now, obviously, this all comes at a time when the United States and South Africa are having a big barney, well, over our ambassador to the United States, who, as you will know, if you watched my video yesterday, got expelled. And I did a whole video yesterday around my thoughts around the ambassador arriving home in Cape Town, and obviously what I thought about the comments that he made. And if you haven't already watched that video, I would encourage you, well, to go watch it. In any case, Ramaphosa has been asked by the DA to potentially consult the GNU parties so that Ramaphosa doesn't just appoint another ANC stooge to go to the United States and inflame things. Because it does appear that in the NEC and in the upper echelons of the ANC, everything is pro-Palestine. Everything is America bad, Palestine great, Israel must burn. And if you listen to some of the rhetoric coming out of the top brass in the ANC, that's pretty true. But in any case, the GNU party said, hey, Ramaphosa, hook us up, let's have a talk about it, let's nominate a guy that actually won't make us look stupid. Ramaphosa said, I don't need to ask you, I can do what I want. I'm the president, I don't need to actually get anybody's approval to nominate ambassadors. And so in this instance, amazingly, Ramaphosa is growing a pair and he's just going to do what he wants. And we see this time and time again with Ramaphosa. When he really wants to do something, he does it. Doesn't matter who tells him not to. And this is a stark contrast to the way that he runs the rest of his government. Because if you've seen the critique by Thabo Mbeki's brother, Mr. Mbeki, basically says that Cyril Ramaphosa's leadership of the ANC is very weak. He says Ramaphosa is a very weak president. In fact, since being involved with the GNU, he says he's been even weaker because the president attempts to never actually make a decision on anything. Instead, he just defaults to the, GNU. And what I would say to Mr. Mbeki is that's not Cyril Ramaphosa being weak, that's Cyril Ramaphosa being lazy. Because he doesn't effectively want to make decisions because that's a lot of hard work. It's much easier just to go, run your own departments. Nothing to do with me, guy. Nothing to see here. But you see, when Cyril actually wants to be a strong leader, when it's a socialist bend and a typical ANC policy type position he wants to take, yeah, he's pretty big-headed and he'll just go for it. He'll just do what he wants. So who exactly is being nominated to our position of the new ambassador to the United States? And the answer is no one knows, because the ANC hasn't decided yet. And what I would say is, don't hold your britches. This is going to take some time. Cyril's not going to do this quickly. However, for those of you who've been watching the channel, you would know that the number one contender to become the American ambassador to South Africa was actually Joel Pollock. But you see, Joel's maybe got himself out of the job because he's been too vocal. And he's called for the United States to take specific policy positions against South Africa even before he was appointed. And so this has led some individuals now to say that he basically talked himself out of the job. And this comes on the news that Trump actually nominated. He hasn't actually yet been appointed. It still needs to go before the Senate and then referred to the Committee on Foreign Relations to approve. It's not just like in South Africa where the president just does what he wants. The Americans actually have forms of oversight and forms of governance. In any case, a nomination was made today for Brent Bozell III. It's always nice when they have a number after the name, then you know you're really dealing with somebody here. In any case, Mr. Bozell III. In any case, Brent III has been nominated as the ambassador to South Africa. And this actually was a very interesting nomination. Many individuals said this is peculiar because the individual has zero engagement with South Africa. He's never actually been here. He's never made a policy position or a statement on South Africa in his life. So actually a really bizarre individual to nominate. So why him? Actually, you need to look at who Brent is. And who he is, according to the media, he's a right-wing conspirator who thinks that the media is captured by the left wing. And so he's a critic of the media because it is captured by the left wing. And so he actually understands how media bias works, and he understands the lies that the media generally tend to portray. Why does this become interesting? Because we are assured that none of the stuff that everybody's saying is occurring in South Africa is actually happening. The media have come to the protection of the government and they've gone all around the world and said, South Africa, none of that's happening. Elon's lying, the media's lying, so forth, so forth. So to actually nominate an individual who specializes in almost detecting the lies of the media and the lies of the left-wing propaganda, it's a stroke of genius. On top of that, whilst he's a critic of all these individuals, never actually made a policy position on South Africa, so he doesn't actually have an axe to grind. He's a free thinker. And so effectively, this individual has been nominated to be our ambassador. It will be very interesting to see if he actually gets the job. But on a final news story, Not has been at it again, and he issued this video.
White people came here. They need to assimilate to our culture, not the other way around. It's bad enough we speak their language with a proficiency that they cannot even master. But they still need to assimilate to our culture. They need to assimilate to Ubuntu. That's the only way in which we can coexist within this environment. Otherwise, we will slaughter all of them, drive them to the sea, literally. It might not be me. It might not be me calling for it.
I'm not a part of that thing. I'm just allowing him to talk.
No, I'm just saying, it might not be me. It might not be me calling for that. In fact, if white people are being driven to the sea, I'm least likely to be in the front lines driving them to the sea, right? Because of my disposition.
What is your disposition?
As in, I'm a privileged black person in this country.
So why would you want to drive white people to the sea if you're just as privileged as they are?
The majority of black people, right, have been oppressed by white people and the white system. And if at any point they decide that they want to drive people to the sea, I will not discourage them.
Mm-hmm.
Now, why this video is interesting isn't because anybody's really going to listen to it or thinks that the guy's smart. He's clearly retarded, like super retarded. And many of the black individuals that watch him also say, we think he's retarded. So please, ladies and gentlemen, don't sit there and be like super offended by this. But what it does show you is almost the media double standards, because we are assured there are no two-tier systems in South Africa, especially when it comes through to black on white racism, which we are assured doesn't exist. But you frequently see the double standards in play, because had this been a white individual who made the similar comments, the Human Rights Commission would have already issued a case against them. And it would be front page news on every single news outlet going. But when an individual of color makes the comments, they're historically a disadvantaged. And so as the Human Rights Commission tells us, we need to take into account their previously disadvantaged status and just give them free passes. The double standards are palpable. And, ladies and gentlemen, may actually be why Brent was actually nominated as our ambassador. Because he understands double standards. He understands the way that the media and the government may lie and twist facts to make him seem more palatable to the average individual. And when he goes and he repeats that back to the United States government, no one can say, yeah, but you've got an axe to grind. Like, he doesn't. He's an unknown. He's the best person to nominate for the job because of that. But that's just my opinion. You let me know what you think in the comment section below. Until tomorrow, bye.